With that said, it is my pleasure to introduce to you from Scotland, Jules Horne.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? That's great. Thanks very much, Dwight, for that warm welcome, and thanks also to Bob, who I've seen in the names there, and also to Anita for helping with the tech side. It's I'm so delighted to be invited to speak to you. It was a really lovely invitation that came from Bob out of the blue, and it's exciting for me to connect with you across the planet like this. I think it's a lovely thing to do, and just to give you a picture of what's around today, it's a very wet and Scottish type of weather where I am. I'll tell you a little bit about where I am so we can get a sense of place. And I'm very interested also in your place. I looked at Inkslinger. I see that you're a very active group. You've got a lot of publication track record. A lot of you have got a lot of publishing and, as I see, editing skills and are very much in that space. And so I think I thought there's so much to cover with audio. What I'll focus on is what I struggled to do it, and I learned a lot from doing it really badly. And I needed to just learn so much that nobody was going to tell me about. So I'm going to share those things with you. So if you're wanting to get into audio, it'll help you fast track and not make those mistakes. And give you a sense of where the market is and how in a most straightforward way to get into that. So the chat's there if anyone wants to speak in the chat. Anita's going to be just looking out for questions, and I'll keep half an eye on it as well. But what I'm going to do is present with some PowerPoint slides. I do get a little bit fast speaking if I get excitable, so just wave, wave and tell me to slow down. Also aware that my accent, my Scottish accent might be unfamiliar and it can take a little while to attune. So attunement is quite a big concept in writing for audio. So the idea of getting familiar with someone's voice is something that happens in writing for the ear. And if anyone's uncomfortable with having video on, it's absolutely fine to switch the video off, whatever's comfortable for you, because it's quite an unusual sort of thing to be doing a Zoom, and not everyone likes to be visible all the time. So in a while, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also going to ask you to do something in the chat. But let's try the screen share first, and fingers crossed this is going to work. So hopefully you can all see this, and I'm just going to quickly zoom through the context for this. I have a site called Method Writing, which is about advanced writing craft. And I have a site, my own site with my own stuff on it, which is my creative project. And those 3 books along the top are my advanced writing craft books. Now I need to, yeah, great. So what you'll find on my name site, juleshorne.com, is a kind of mix of the types of things that I do. So I'm a writer who crosses between radio, performance, spoken word, poetry, and nonfiction. So it's a mess, basically. It's a complete mess of different things. But what unites it is a sense of place. And the sense of place is really important to me. I think it's something I feel very rooted in my place. I'm very curious about your place and the soundscapes of place. So you'll find a lot of things that are about that, where I'm from. And I was interested to see the new member, I didn't catch your name there just now. She's interested in geology because that's one of the things, or she has a background in ranger services because my partner's a ranger, and so I'm very interested in place and interpretation of place. So there's not just the fictionalized version of your place, but there's also introducing it to people who don't know it, maybe in a non-fiction way. So those are kind of some of the things that I cover. So language used in lots of different ways. It's slightly cut off here, but where I see my book sitting, my non-fiction, is a link between learners and the writing industries. So what I found was going into drama, going into journalism and these things as a complete newbie without a clue, there was a load of stuff that I'd never encountered, and it was really tough to learn it. And I couldn't find the books that I needed to get me up to speed. So to get through that awful new sort of, what, you all know this stuff. How come you know this stuff? How come no one's told me this stuff? And that's what I've put into the books, because I think there's a gap between learning as a creative writer and exploring and stimulus and that kind of work. And then when you go to into the writing industries, which might be journalism, it might be editorial, it might be writing for the ear, which is something I've had to work out, and writing for performance, all those things. So I'm trying to kind of um, bridge that gap essentially. Now, these are PowerPoint slides. It'll go quite fast, but you'll be able to download them. I'll give you a link. So you'll have all this material and you'll be able to check out the materials and follow things up. So although it's covering quite a lot of ground, you'll be able to follow up whatever you like later on, and also just email and anything you want to know more about. So don't worry about it being a bit kind of fast, because there's a lot to cover. Um, so, and just to say, yeah, the link between learner and the writing industries, um, I went from a really small place without any background in writing, but had a wonderful primary school teacher. So it's nice to be reminded of John Stables, because he really fired our imaginations at age, I don't know, probably 9, I think, when I had him. And he introduced us to drama and fun and playfulness in writing. And eventually I did German. Mainly, I'll tell you why, because I had a teacher at school who was quite sneaky, who came into the class and gave us some German words, and they're the same as the Scots words. So he goes Kuh, Kuh, and Hand, and Fuß, Fuß, and Kirche, Kirk. Kirk is the Scots words for church. And he said, German's really easy for Scots, so everyone come and do German. So we went, yes. And so that's how I ended up doing German. And became a translator eventually. And then I'd always loved writing and joined an amateur dramatic group and wrote a play for them and kind of got into drama that way. And eventually, long, circuitous, I now teach for this distance learning university in the UK, the Open University, and I teach creative writing on their MA. And I help to write the script strand, which is radio drama, film script, and TV script. So it's and performance writing generally. So, and unlike most of my colleagues, I'm a passionate indie author. I'm really keen on the indie author space and how creative it can be to be publishing your own work. So I'm really interested in that. So that's just a quick thumbnail. And yeah, so where am I? Is this place called Kelso, which, as we were discussing earlier, there's a Kelso not too far from where you are. And Kelso is a town right on the border between Scotland and England. I don't know if you can see this geological map. It's kind of covered up on my screen, but it's in the bottom right-hand corner, right on the border, 4 miles away. And one of the interesting things about this is it's where 3 tectonic plates collided. So right under us is a place where is the place where there used to be this ocean, this mighty ocean, and it's a crumpled place where tectonic plates collided, which I think is quite interesting when you're going about in this seemingly quiet place. It's actually got this seismic stuff happening underneath. So that brings us to this mountain imagery and the idea of being in the foothills of an interesting new development for writers, and that is the audio space. It's a bit like about maybe 2010 when self-publishing took off, really took off, and it was just whoosh. And we're kind of in the early foothills of a similar development for audiobooks. So that this is just to give you that idea of where we are. There's a huge climb ahead and a huge expansion ahead, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. But I'm going to stop share now and just turn to the chat. And what I'd love is if I just want to get a sense of where you are and your place, and if you could all just take a moment to type in the chat. And what I'd like you to do is type what you can see outside your window, and then we'll get a kind of collage, just a few brief notes about what's outside your window, and we'll get a collage of where you are. If you just want to take a couple of minutes to try that. There's some lovely details, and I'm seeing some pictures of plants and wheelie bins, dovlings, what lovely word, stucco wall. There are certainly things I wouldn't be seeing from my window. Yellow finches, lots of bird experts. Um, even something that's probably very ordinary to you, like a dirt yard, that's something that sounds completely novel to me. It conjures a sense of your place in a way that would be unusual to me, because I don't have a dirt yard outside my place. And I think one of the um, key things about writing is what's familiar to you may not be appreciated by you as much as by other people because it's so familiar. So I mean, my goodness, you've got a Joshua tree, and that's just extraordinary evocative word, and it just sounds lovely. And color, I always think like this is the magic dust of writing. These details, um, these wonderful words that you're typing in there, they really conjure pictures, and they're very distinctive pictures for your place. And often we don't notice the words on our doorstep and appreciate them quite as much. And there's a kind of for me, they're very, very evocative and create a wonderful picture. So and a place is a great starting point for story as well. The place where you are um, is the kind of status quo of what's around, and then something happens, something changes, someone walks into the space, something tips about the space. So you're always looking about, this is the status quo, and what changes, what shifts when something happens. And I think that's often when a story starts. So it's nice actually, if you don't mind, Anita, later if we can sort of capture the chat, because it's really great for me to be able to see what people have said, and just to get the sense of that color of your place. So irises and roses. Red tile roofs, and colors are extraordinarily powerful as well. If you're making images, red tile roof and green suburb community, green grass, colors seem to be more salient in people's imaginations. And if you're writing for audio, you're if you're writing at all, but particularly if you're writing for audio, you're trying to conjure pictures, and colors are extremely powerful because they lodge in the imagination really strongly. So I just wanted to hear a bit, get a sense of where you are. If maybe later on, if we get the chance, I might ask you what's in your room as well, but that might be a bit private. I don't know. That's another thing nice to try, because you don't realize that what's around you is possibly really unusual for other people. So appreciating what's familiar to you. So I'll go back to sharing the screen. And I'm going to go on with where we are. And this is just a romp through the territory of audiobooks. So you're I gather you're familiar with self-publishing, so there'll be some analogies here. Oh, it's really exciting. I just wanted to say this is incredibly exciting. And who it's particularly exciting for is storytellers, whether they're fiction writers, whether they're people who engage with groups and tell stories in that way. So the oral tradition, non-fiction writers, memoir, someone mentioned earlier, it's great for that. There's a big non-fiction market. It's wonderful for spoken word and performance poetry, for writer performers. Some writers, and if you think of Charles Dickens, for example, some writers have a performer gene. Some writers are very introverted. I'm very introverted, but still have a performer gene that comes out sometimes when you're reading. And so it's wonderful for that, because it's got that intimacy of radio. It's also brilliant for minority languages and dialects. I speak Scots. It's quite hard to get Scots out there, very few speakers. It's not a mass market, but it's still a way to get and also there are arguments about how to spell it. It's like publishing, it's not without issues. And it's great for any form of spoken word that's maybe less heard. It's a great way to get it out. So how big is audiobooks? How explosive is it? Bob was saying about the explosive. Well, before COVID, there was the London Book Fair, which is one of the big, one of the big ones, and it was the hot story at that time in the autumn 2019. There was standing room only at the audiobooks session. That was an industry trade show. It's got double-digit growth for 5 years running. There's absolutely no industry which has double-digit growth for 5 years running. And it looks like it's going to continue. So here's a graph. You don't need to pick apart the details of the graph, but just look at the colors. Fiction is the light blue, non-fiction is the dark color. And I'm not sure if you can see this pointer, but well, 5 along is 2020, and then you see the exponential growth going up towards 2027. So it really is, and that's the US market alone. And ebook sales obviously were growing really fast, and audiobook sales have now eclipsed ebook sales in the US. So it's that kind of madness. It's just really, really growing fast. Forecast is continuation of double-digit growth over the next few years, and an anticipation of 13 billion from 2.5 billion by 2027. So it's just kind of really taking off. So we're in those foothills, and that's what's ahead. That's just to give you a scope. What's different about audiobooks is and why publishers are particularly excited by it is it's a different market. The listener profile is different to people who normally read books or read print books and ebooks. So although there's a lot of overlap, it's bringing in new consumers of books. So that's very exciting for publishers. And that listener profile has some distinctive aspects. There are a lot more men than there are with, for example, print books. So it's a younger demographic. There's more people under 25 who've traditionally been harder to reach for print and ebooks, but they are reading. They are calling it reading as well, reading audiobooks. Or consuming audiobooks. People are listening while they're active. So it's like radio in that you'll be doing something else at the same time. Whereas with books, you're obviously devoted to the book and concentrating on that. So it's a very different kind of physical experience, and it's opening it up to people who maybe traditionally didn't engage so much with print books. Very exciting for publishers to be able to reach that kind of a segment of the market. Listeners are typically doing these kinds of things. So they're not sitting like you would in the old days around the radio set with the whole family. You're maybe commuting, and you'll know this from yourself, from your own engagement with audiobooks. You might be cooking, you might be exercising, which is quite a big one. People in the gym, out jogging, taking your mind off the pain, the jogging. So people are listening and doing something else at the same time. Um, and the most popular genres in the fiction space are mystery, suspense, and thriller. This replicates print and ebooks, and particularly ebooks. So genre mystery, suspense, thriller are very popular. Um, so I just give a sketch of the landscape, and this is about markets. So the thing about trying to sketch the market is that it's moving so fast and so many different things are happening at the same time. So this is just a kind of sketchy overview for orientation. And it's like a machine with lots of moving parts. So you'll know that if you've done self-publishing, there's Kindle Direct Publishing, there's Are You Wide, Are You Exclusive, are you with Ingram Spark? And there are all these moving parts, and it can be quite a lot to take in. What are all the different bits? So I'm going to give you the context, and then I'm going to kind of go, well, here's probably the best way in, so that you don't get too overwhelmed, which is what happened to me, just trying to juggle all these moving parts. So it's moving super fast. So avoid overwhelm, and you can refer back to this later on. But broadly, there's Amazon and there's everybody else. And that'll be familiar to you from the world of self-publishing. There's the kind of monolithic, huge Amazon, and there's being wide, which is being Amazon exclusive, and there's being wide, which is everybody else. So at the moment, it's very unequal. It's a very unequal dynamic, and Amazon is pretty well, by far the biggest player in the audiobook space. So I'll concentrate on that briefly. Amazon, being the kind of overarching company, owns Audible, which is where people go to buy their audiobooks very often. So you hear as a consumer, you listen to Audible audiobooks. And if you're a writer, you will want to go to ACX. ACX is Audio Creative Exchange or Creator Exchange. It comes up later on. ACX is where producers go, and that includes writers who want to find narrators or writers who want to upload their audio files. So Amazon has very cleverly created essentially a marketplace, which includes both the consumers and the producers, and it has all the marketing intel and the stats of what's going on. So it's this machine essentially that it's created, and it replicates what's happened with publishing and self-publishing. On the right, which is the yellow group, loads of different names in there, and they include Barnes and Noble, Kobo, and so on. Now that's everyone else, and it's a bit like draft to digital. It's like you've got Amazon dealing with the Amazon stuff, and then if you're in self-publishing, you might go to draft to digital to reach all the other people. Interestingly, in the middle is Apple, and Amazon also gets your book on iTunes. So unlike in books, audiobooks that are on Amazon also go into Apple iTunes. So you can see the strength and the size of that market dominance, essentially. So Amazon includes iTunes in its distribution for audiobooks. So that's quite a big thing. So it kind of makes the blue and the orange together absolutely almighty huge, and the yellow of everybody else at the moment really quite small. So basically the place to be at the moment, but with some caveats coming up, is Amazon. So Audiobook Creation Exchange is a really good title because it gives you that sense of it being a marketplace and a place where you can hire narrators, you can be a narrator, and offer services, and meet the others who are going to help make your production. So it's a kind of marketplace. So I'm kind of drifting off the yellow one for the moment to show you that this is the big player essentially in the space at the moment. There are issues with this as well as general issues about Amazon, but one thing specific to audiobooks is that Amazon sets the book price. Now, that's quite a shock when you think about in what line of business does the distributor set the book price with no recourse to the person who made the book. So Amazon sets audiobook prices. Um, there's a long contract lock-in. It used to be a 7-year exclusive contract lock-in. Now, 7 years in the world of online books and online publishing is just madness. So there was a long contract lock-in that's now been reduced to a year. So that's progress, but they had a huge monopoly to start with. The other issue with Amazon is that there's no ads service. Now, if you self-publish, you can use Amazon ads to promote your book. So that does not apply to audiobooks. So there's no real clear way to reach your market. So those are some of the underlying issues. However, it's changing fast, and there are some players coming up behind who are going to challenge that dominance, that market dominance. But for the moment, that's how things are. Royalties, just to give you an idea, again, there's loads of moving parts, but very broadly, you get 40% exclusive cover price if you're exclusive with Audible. If you go non-exclusive, which means you can also put it out on Kobo and all these other people, it's 25%. There's another model, which is if you pair up with a narrator or a producer, you can cut your costs because they can do a sort of profit share. So there's broadly those models. So yeah, and this is quite confusing. So I think I would just just go. It's Amazon that exists, but you can go back to it later on. There's different buy options. You may have come across Audible credits, so you have maybe a credit a month or 2 credits a month, and then people can buy your book with a credit. I have sold all my audiobooks through Audible member credits. I get a statement every now and then, and very few are straight retail, very few are Audible members buying outside the credits, which means that the Audible membership is the main driver of audiobook sales. So the other things are just small at the moment. So Amazon controls the price, Amazon chooses what to promote, and members purchase with Amazon credits. Increasingly, they're also inviting members to join for free. So there's some worries that down the line may be a Spotify type model, which has been really bad for musicians. Which Spotify is a kind of you pay per listen, and that has driven down what musicians get from their music. So people are a little bit worried that Amazon is a bit too powerful. So that's that story. Amazon is very powerful. You kind of need to be there as a writer, but it's also a bit too powerful. So, and you might have heard of Audiblegate, which is over the last year, and there's been a lot of lobbying and campaigning by writers, including the Writers Guilds, international writers unions, and groups, because the Amazon terms have been so unbusiness friendly for writers. So it's just to be aware there is this Audiblegate lobbying going on, which is to try and get sensible and protective conditions for writers with Amazon. I know a couple of writers who are radio dramatists who have been with BBC as radio dramatists, and they've done some of these, podcast thriller type dramatizations, written them, and the terms are not great. And because they're so powerful, they can, kind of do that. So it's worth being aware of. There's some great things about it, but there are also some issues. And so we have some alternatives coming through, which is really nice. And that's going to evolve. There are a couple of other audiobook creation exchanges. One is Findaway Voices. The other one's Authors Republic. I've not used either of those yet, although I've heard good things about them. And they're alternatives and, in a way, challengers to Amazon's dominance of the audiobook space. Both of these are similar in that they're a bit like they're aggregators. They do everybody else. So they cover Kobo and Barnes and Noble and Google Play. So they're kind of aggregators for everybody that's not Amazon. And they also offer narration services. So if you want to find a narrator, or you want to offer narration services, it's got that audio production marketplace in both of these as well. So some interesting things going on. And promoting your book is more possible because there are ad services coming through now, which allow you to promote your books. So if anyone's ever done BookBub ads, it's one of these ad services for ebooks. There's now, I think it's a related company actually. It's called Chirp, and it's a branch of BookBub, and they do the audio side of ads. So you can, just like you sign up for a BookBub mail out on the themes that you like, the genres that you like, you can do a similar thing with Chirp for audiobooks. There's another promotional service called Audiobook Boom. Again, I haven't used that because I'm exclusive Amazon at the moment, but that exists, and these things are developing and coming through. So, and there's one other really interesting one, which is straight to reader. Now, this is becoming more and more popular. It's never been that huge an aspect of writers' income, but if you have a mailing list and you have readers who are fans of your and follow your writing, you can also now sell audiobooks straight to readers, which is interesting. How that works is there's a service called BookFunnel. I think a lot of writers who have multiple books will be familiar with BookFunnel, which is a service for giving ebooks out. You can just get somebody's email and they'll ping it out in whichever format you want. It's a really, really, really useful service. And I'll give you some freebies via BookFunnel actually at the end of this. So there's, and it's tied up to a payment system called PayHip. It's the same company. So you can put your book up there and somebody can buy it from your site, get paid via PayHip, so it's straight to reader. So it's quite new, it's in beta, but that's definitely coming through. And a thrilling story about straight to reader, some authors who are really huge are cheesed off with Amazon and have gone the independent publishing route. And Cory Doctorow, he earned 207,000 in a year independently publishing this audiobook. So interesting. There's the Amazon monolith, but there's also some other things and viewpoints coming through. Okay. I can't actually see chat, so if there's anything coming up, if I'm speaking too loud, I need to do wave and let me know. Sorry, speaking too fast. So with that aside, which is a bit of a romp through the territory, if you like, I wanted to go on to how you can do it yourself. Bob mentioned that some of the group have looked at audiobooks and they've costed it, and it's actually quite expensive to hire a studio and all that kind of thing. So one of the questions is, can you do it yourself? If you're going to do it yourself, a bit like going into self-publishing, what are the pitfalls? How does it work? Is it for you? So I wanted to talk about my experience and give you my key nuggets that'll help you if you're planning to go there. And I think it's a brilliant thing for groups to get into, because there's always somebody that's got a good techie background. There's always somebody who knows who's got kit. There's usually a musician who's got some kit going about, and there's ways to kind of join together and make it happen. And if you've got members, if you're doing like anthologies and you've got short stories, you've got nice array of voices. I think that's a really nice thing for a group to try and band together to do. So here's my suggestions. So first of all, what not to do, which is what I did essentially, which is to think, how hard can it be? You know, when I started self-publishing, the first thing I did, because I happened to have a copy of InDesign, was I thought, I'm going to do it with InDesign. and I'm going to do a short story collection, and it's got photos in it, and I don't know what else. It was really silly way to go about it. I should have done something. I should have done an ebook first, done something quite straightforward without added images and all that kind of thing. But it took me, I don't know, a year or so to get the book out doing InDesign. Well, it was a similar kind of, I don't know, hubris or whatever with audiobooks. I thought, surely you just need a microphone and you sit in front of it and you do that. And yeah, so don't do that. And another thing not to do is use your guitar equipment. And I'll explain why in a minute. Those skills are really useful, but not necessarily in this particular space. So let's go through this. Oh, this is what I felt like a lot of the time when doing my audiobook production. It took me a long time. If you take one thing away from this today, it's to know that you can't fix things in post production. You need to record clean, record at good quality, and then you have very few problems later on. But I sort of jumped in, trying things out, got a mic, um, just thought, oh, I'll sort it in post production. I'll tweak things and I'll EQ stuff out and whatnot. Doesn't work. You've got to record it clean. And so I'm going to explain how to do that. I recently heard from a friend who's got a book out, and her son is a musician, and he's a very talented young musician with loads of kit and gear. And he was going to get his mum set up with her audiobook production, and they were doing it in the living room. And then a couple of days later, she got back to me and said, it's been rejected by ACX. And I thought, I kind of know why, because it happened to me several times. And it happened to me after I'd recorded 50,000 words of a book. So I'm going to save you all that, I hope, with this. So you can't fix it in post-production. So what you need, I'm struggling to see so the basics. Audiobooks is a very particular kind of audio recording. So it's close mic. So I'll give you an idea of this with this mic where I am just now. So I'm speaking about a hand's breadth away just now. It's just up here out of sight. And if I go in, I'm like that. And I hope you can hear there's a bit of a difference in the sound quality. So audiobooks are relatively close mic'd. So if you're a performer who's singing into a big microphone as your normal or a speaker, that's a different style of microphone and a different style of delivery. So it's got that one-to-one close-up intimacy. So it's like radio style, essentially. So you'll be familiar with mics from other walks of life, but it is a kind of different style. So it's just worth being aware of that because it affects the mics as well. So all you need is a decent mic, editing software, something to link your mic and the computer, and some narration technique. These are the four things you need. And I'm going to go through what you need, what a sort of straightforward way to get these. What do I mean by that? And before all that, so there are those things, but the most important one of all is to control your environment. Because if you don't control your environment, you can have all the brilliant other things in place, but it won't work very well. So it's controlling your environment. Luckily, that's really simple. And I've got a super tip that took me about a year to learn. It's one of these situations where I thought, no, why didn't somebody tell me this? So I'm going to tell you that. So control your environment. What does that mean? Well, you're trying to minimize the space between your voice and the microphone, and you're trying to reduce the noise that's off stage. So it's often useful to think of being in some kind of leaky goldfish bowl or a vase or a leaky vase or something. Sound can leak in and get in the way. So you're trying to control these parameters. So here's an example of the stuff outside that you might want to try and control in some way. Dogs, chainsaws, overhead jets, and birds, even birds first thing in the morning, the dawn chorus. We couldn't control that. Even if it was double glazing, it was still making noise. So there's a window and that's shaded slightly with the use of a window or double glazing. Then you've got the next. Oh, in Kelso, what we have underfoot is these cobbles. So big stone cobbles and cars and lorries going across it every hour of the day. Where we are is just kind of to the right of that big building. So where I am just now is kind of just along that street there, on the first floor. So we're right next to all those cobbles, which is actually, if you think about it, really difficult to do radio or to do, but there's a secret. So next you've got inside the room, and obviously things like dogs and children, people clamping, going across your upper stories is going to be noisy. Staircases are noisy, but there are also surprising things. And in radio, you start to get your ear in for that. When you go into a space, you hear there's fridge, switch off the fridge. There's a clock on the wall. Let's take that outside, put it down outside. So you start to get your ear in for things like that. And then if they're behind a door, that's obviously adding a layer of distance, which is great. And then there's different things you can do to muffle inside the space. You can see I've got some of these foamy things, which are quite inexpensive. Acoustic foam, they're called. They're just, and what they do is they smooth surfaces are reflective. They reflect sound, and it pings around and pings into the mic. And what this does is disrupt the pinging around of the sound, a bit like this image here. So you can see the echo and the reflective surfaces. You often don't think of sound as being a reflected thing, but it does ping off smooth surfaces. So my first experiment was in the living room, which is relatively bare walls. Then I tried somewhere, it's not too big, but it had barish walls. And obviously there's a big telly, which is a smooth surface. There's you might have wooden floors, smooth surface. Even the table where you're sitting might be a smooth surface. So it's good to put something like felt or something to stop that being so smooth and to absorb some of that reflection. And then inside the space, what else can you control? Well, things like earrings that jangle, it's surprising, but they'll get picked up. Jangly jewelry, people with leather jackets, chairs that are leather. I prefer not to sit on a swivel chair, because first of all, I'm tempted to do this, and secondly, it can be noisy. So I've got quite a solid chair underfoot. I can't remember what that picture is that I can't see. And then in the room itself, something that is can surprise you is the noise of the computer. So two things. Computers have fans, and these are a noise, and cables can touch each other, and that can also create electrical hum. So those are easy to sort. But just to say that there are lots of surprising sound sources, and the more you can control these, the better your sound environment will be. What I use, and I think a lot of people use this now as a computer, is a solid state laptop. I use it's actually a Surface, and it's good enough in its spec. It's quite a small spec one, but it actually does handle sound software like Adobe Audition, which is amazing. So it means that you've got no fan kind of crunching around. So really simple and neat thing. So really, if you were able to get one of those for the group, that would be a super idea. Sometimes cables, they're rattling around at your feet and they can cause hum. So that's something to look out for. So those are some of the perils, but then I want you to give you my really super tip, which I wish somebody had told me about much earlier, which is if you get equipment or a microphone that can cut low frequencies, you immediately eliminate traffic noise, rumble. Often you'll eliminate footsteps and things going around if they're very low. And so what to look out for is a thing called a low cut filter. It's on a microphone, you might find this symbol, or if you've got the sound desk, if you're a musician, you might have a sound desk with a microphone input, which has a low cut filter. It's this symbol. Confusingly, it's also called a high pass filter. That's because it lets the higher things pass through. So for low rumbles, this is a really brilliant thing. And I'll show you a microphone that's got that, which is the one that I'm using just now. And I'm in a place which is very, very rumbly, and it's cut out all those cobbles. It's just been brilliant. And the reason why you want to cut it out at source and not afterwards, because you might be asking, well, surely I can, eliminate some of these frequencies, is you're cutting out the noise information. So you're making it less detailed. So you need to cut it out at source. So just to give you an example of what that looks like, on the left, and this is a waveform, it's showing the intensity of the frequencies, and the high frequencies are at the top there and the low frequencies are down below, so those low rumbles of the cobbles. And what you're seeing left to right is time. So this is some noise going along in time, maybe a few seconds of time. You can see on the left that there's all that, the voice is the orange stuff, and below that is the low rumble. So there's a kind of straight line going. I don't know what that straight line is, but it's a kind of low rumble at that frequency. And it's quite messy. You can see it's quite messy with purple down below there. And with the low cut filter on the right, that's it cut. And so it's taking out all that stuff, which is a really brilliant thing. It gives you lots of sound information, but it takes out the gubbins that you've got on the left. So that's brilliant. Again, don't try to fix in post-production, get it right going in. And sound is information, you lose the detail. I'll give you this example. I don't know if you see that. So this meme going around. It was a fresco which in Spain, which someone was cleaning, and they over cleaned it too enthusiastically, and then made it worse, and obviously removed quite a lot of the information. And then they thought, oh heck, we've got to try and patch it up. So they tried to paint on top, and it's really unfortunate and badly went horribly wrong at restoration example, which they're now trying to unravel and get right again, get back to where it was. But this is kind of an analogy for what happens if trying to fix in post-production. You've got lots of lovely detail, and then you take stuff out, and then you have to fix and patch, and it doesn't quite work. So yeah, get it going in. So here's a audio recording cave. So it's a bit like going into a cave, and some of the things you can do to help muffle reflections. This is an example, and it's how I started out as well, with this kind of muffled space in my room. You can use quilts, thick curtains, those foam tiles. You can see those yellow ones on the back. They're similar to my blue ones in here. Rugs to cover wooden floors, and a table covering, as discussed. Everything like that helps to cut reflection. And if you want to test it, simply go under your quilt with a microphone and listen to the difference. Just record yourself. And people actually do this. You see some podcasters who are doing their podcast inside a cupboard with a big quilt hanging around them, or even just like in a cave on the floor. It's absolutely possible to do that. I don't know how possible it is for a 50,000K book or a 100,000K book. It might get a bit sweaty and trying and whatnot, but it's absolutely possible, and it makes for wonderful sound. So it's worth trying just to get a sense of what that's like. Try that out. So here's a kind of improvised sound booth, and perfectly workable. Loads of BBC radio drama people and whatnot are mocking up these things. Since COVID, they've all been at it. You see lots of examples online, everyone doing this kind of thing at home. So it's exciting that people can improvise in that way. There's a thing at the back there as well. You can see a kind of reflector gizmo that somebody's got, but it's a simple setup. And the main thing is it's got wonderful muffled reflections. So that's the biggie. Control your environment. Really, if you can do that, you're halfway there, definitely. So next one, I'm going to look at editing software. We'll knock that off because that too is very simple. The one to go for, if you've not been there before, there's a great free one, which is called Audacity. It's available for PC, Mac, and Linux. So I would go for that. I happen to have Adobe Audition because I've got an education license. So if anyone has an education email address, you can get a cut price version of Adobe Audition. I wouldn't be able to afford Adobe Creative Cloud otherwise. So it's worth knowing that they have an educational license, and maybe somebody in your group has that access, which is really nice. I've heard good things about Reaper if you're getting into it, and that's another thing come across. So that's easy. Decent mic and computer link, I'm going to take them together because they're connected. What I would suggest here is go to acx.com because they've got good specs. There's new mics coming out all the time, and that's where you'll find a really good school of steps for different budgets and different kinds of audio setups. In brief, what you're looking for is a directional mic. So it's not an Omni that has loads of all-round sound. It's not a surround sound type of microphone. It's directional like this one. And you're looking for a radio style mic and not a singer style microphone, which is, more projection. There are two basic flavors of audio equipment. One is the type that musicians use, and that's those things on the right. That's XLRs. If you've got an electric guitar, you'll have a 1/4-inch jack and you'll plug that into an amplifier. That's all the analog equipment. And then there's the digital equipment, which is the USB types of interface. And actually, those two typically don't necessarily speak to each other. So if you've got musician type equipment, you've got to get it into your kit. You might have one of these already, in which case you're already sorted. If you've got the Zoom recorder, that's a USB interface. It links your microphone and digital. If you've got some musician kit, you might have a USB interface. So ask a friend if they've got a USB interface. And if you're getting one, get 2 voice inputs because you might want to do dialogue, podcast dialogue, for example. So it's really useful to have 2. And you also want preamps, which is just a kind of mini dial that gives you more boost on your microphone sound. So it's useful to have that. So, but you can kind of, you'll get those notes, but basically there's a lovely thing which I've come across, which solves everything in a oneer, and that's the microphone I'm using now, and it's a USB microphone, and it's called the Rode NTG, and it's a pointy microphone, a shotgun. You can stick it on top of your video camera. It has shock mount, so it doesn't get pick up noise vibrations, and it's got crucially that low cut filter that I was talking about. So I'm really happy to discover this microphone, and it's a real Swiss Army knife of microphones because you can use it as a video mic. There are other cheaper ones as well, also in the Rode series. So if you're starting off, it might be good to try a USB mic. Amazon doesn't necessarily recommend them going, if you're going the distance with audio, but it's a brilliant way to get started with it. And I really love this mic. I'm using it for all sorts of things. The other one, which I've used before, is a ribbon mic. That's a bit like what they use in broadcast. And why I like this is because I've got a really clicky voice, which I can't sort in post-production. So it's better for, it takes out some of the highs. So you wouldn't need to go there probably, but I had to find something that worked for my clicky voice. So I went with that. Anyone who's got condenser mics, don't go there because it's like I know like actors are really worried about HD because it's super detailed and really unforgiving and very close up, and it's wonderful visual, but it's very challenging if you're on the end of that camera. It's similar with condenser mics. They're wonderful quality. They're very detailed, but they're also quite unforgiving. So so that's just some basic solutions. I would say a USB mic, and again, look on ACX. They've got details for every budget and what kit you need to get started. So I'm also going to zoom through some recording technique. So room tone is your starting point. Room tone means you've controlled your environment and you've cut the background noise. So once you've got that starting point, you're really ready to go. I first did my recording in my living room, and if you look on the left, you'll see a recording of my living room. So the green bit is me saying hello, and then there's a flat line, a nice thin flat line there, and you think, that's quiet, that's really quiet. And if you zoom in on that, so on the right, you're seeing a kind of under the microscope version of that flat line. You're seeing all the noise that's actually in the room, and that's just reflections bouncing around. And so you can see there's lots of purple stuff that wouldn't get you through ACX. So recording in your living room is unlikely to cut it. You're going to need that muffly stuff round about. On the left is an ACS mastered example. So ACX has downloads, so you can actually look at that. So get your Audacity software and have a look at it, and it'll show you where you match when you do your own recording. So on the right is my so-called quiet living room, but you can see compared with the ACX example that it's not that quiet. It's got lots of reflections because I didn't use lots of textiles and things round about, and it's got bare walls. So here's something that took me a while to learn, is that input gain is the signal going into the microphone. You want to get that high up, as high as you can without going over the top. Because again, if you increase it in post-production, it creates noise. There's a thing in audio which is everything is audio, but noise is bad audio that you don't want. So that might be your cobbles or whatever. And the signal is the good audio that you do want. So you're trying to get a good signal to noise ratio. So you want low room tone and good voice, low cobbles and good, and no cobbles actually, and a good beefy voice. So what I found was that I had my volume in my headphones too high. So I was hearing this big noise coming back from the microphone, and then I would back off. Your sort of instinct is to do this. And when you do that, you're introducing more noise, more space. So keep your your headphone volume low, and then you won't be tempted to correct. You'll be more natural and you won't be tempted to do this. I aim for about a hand span, so I use this. And use a pop shield, which is one of those net things. They're great for clicky voices and for sibilance like s sounds, as well as for pops. And so I need to check how I'm doing for time. Shall I just stop share and come out? Anita, can I just ask you how long, because I'm just rattling through these final points. Am I okay to just continue with those?
Yes, we have, if you just have a few more points, and then we can go to questions and answers.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. So yeah, and here's once you've done your small experiment, really start with a small experiment, maybe a poem, short story, flash fiction, and go to ACX and post it to the Audio Lab, which is the online place where you can test your sample, and it'll tell you whether you're in the right kind of ballpark. Has it got the right kind of room tone, the right signal to noise ratio? And you can try that multiple times. So it's a great way to shortcut and not do what I did, which was try to record a whole book and then upload it and find it didn't work. So this is a relatively new facility. And so I really recommend using this Audio Lab to post up your sample, and you can use a short sample. And just another quick thing, I would always record in, there are two kinds of files. There's WAV files, WAV, and there are MP3s. MP3s are very compressed. And then when it gets put online, it's further compressed. And then people listen in all sorts of small, earpods, as well as in really nice headphones. There's such a spectrum of sound quality. So don't edit in MP3, edit in WAV files and then export to MP3, because you'll get problems. I didn't realize that for a long time. Just do it all in WAV file form. And you don't need to be stereo. Mono's fine. Now, there's a lot of ACX material on there, and I would definitely look at their videos. I think there's a really good shortcut, and there's this guy who does one-to-one training, and I think if I may go to this guy. I haven't trained with him, but I've used a lot of his videos, and I think he would help anyone who's getting into that to cut to the chase, because what he does is he says, right, what's your kit, what have you got, what's your microphone, and he talks you through online and says, okay, you need to do this and this setting, then you just take a note of everything. And so he gives you a way of talking through your kit and your specific situation and your voice. I think he's a really super narrator and sound engineer. If I had my time again, I would go to somebody like that and say, this is what I've got. Am I getting the best of my kit? Can you save me a heck of a lot of time? I think as a group, I think that's a really good move to do that as well. It's maybe a good investment to get somebody to just talk you through. I always take a note of my settings and I photograph it because I always forget what I set it to. Don't do too much at once, because you can hear that energy in the voice. Another good tip is hydrate well the day before, not on the day, because then it's not kind of gone into your body. It's you want your cells to be absorbing the moisture, and so it's good to do it the day before. So glagaloads the day before. I use a tablet with an auto cue app. So to read from, just have it on a little stand here, and then you can silently move it with your finger, and you're not using all these paper noise. So I may leave gaps, or I use a clicker. And it's just that thing again of don't aim to fix it in post. If you hear something that sounds like a pop breath, or just redo it. It's easier to do that than it is to try and match it up later in post. If you decide not to DIY, but you want to go for a narrator, I would ask for, and which you can do on ACX and on Findaway Voices and on that other platform, I would look, if you're fiction, I would look for actor training. So it's a character performance, because they're going to have to do several voices, and it's not enough to just get somebody with a lovely voice. They've got to have those performance instincts and training. I would say there's loads of actors doing that kind of work, and I think you'll get a better performance for your fiction if you look for that training. With non-fiction, similarly, I would ask, well, what's the topic and who's got the right energy for that topic? It might be a medical topic. It might be, kind of upbeat thing about, I don't know, goal setting or something like that. It might be a young person's book. So think about what energy you need, and do it's no good getting a really silky voiced, mellow radio announcer who's got wonderful tonsils if he is quite wrong for your young adult fantasy. Listen to the genre and what people are doing, and for the energy that they're bringing to it. It might be quite specific set of emotional qualities that are different from what a generic radio announcer might bring. In my book, Writing for Audios, there are one or two concepts which are helpful for writers. If you're practicing your script, you'll probably find you want to edit it. and there are some concepts in there, but you'll get that on the downloads that I'll give you later on. So things like attunement, landing, where to land your points, and how to use silence. So my top tips would be: start small, do a sample with flash fiction, nail your room tone, get that right, everything falls into place, and use ACX Lab to test. Oh, and have fun, because it is great fun. It is a really fun thing to do. I've really enjoyed it. It's quite a challenge, but you would get there much more quickly than I did, because you would know what what things to look out for. So I've got some freebies to share, which I'm using BookFunnel for. And if you take this link, you'll be able to pick those up. Actually, the main one is the slides from today, which isn't shown here, but you'll find that up there. And I also have promo codes for the audiobooks. So if you want the audiobook free, get in touch with me. My email's there, info@juleshorne.com. And I can get you a promo code for any of these books. I always appreciate reviews. That's really helpful. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad reviews. It's just massively helpful to me. But you can get the free review copy just by getting in touch. And that goes for the audiobooks too. So I'll stop sharing that. And I hope that's not been too long and too much of a romp, because it's quite a lot. But it's I think if you get those things right, you will get there much faster than I did, and I'm sure you'll do a super job. Anita,
Yes.
what questions have come up?
Thank you, Jules. So far,
Ceiling fans, yeah.
yes, ceiling fans was one of them. And one of our members has a nephew who's a sound engineer, and he's always complaining about ambient noise and room reverberation, and he's a professional. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. He
and-
sounds like a really useful nephew for doing audiobooks. Really, really helpful.
Yes. And the one question we've had so far, and please folks feel free to type any questions you might have for Jules in the chat. But Rusty has asked, is it better to have one or two or multiple voices in a recorded book?
I think it depends on the genre, and it depends on the nature of the book. I think if you want to go for DIY recording, I would definitely start with one voice and build the world that way, and sort of conceive it for one voice and try that out. It becomes very interesting once you start talking about these other parameters, like other voices, and it also costs come into it. So if you're, for example, if you've got a fiction book, probably you're going to want to do it with one actor who's able to do lots of characters. And I mean, actors are amazingly, especially trained actors, very skilled at doing that. And they will, and the thing about that is you get an immersive viewpoint, which is a bit more like, it's a bit more akin to reading a book, because it's within that one voice frame. And then as you get towards variety of voices, you're more towards things like dramatization and these other genres, which are more towards drama and maybe more highly produced audio. So I've never done, I've done sort of drama type things with more than one voice, but it's definitely adding other levels of complication. And so I think practically one voice, it's definitely the way to start. And it's you don't ever need to go, you can do so much with just one voice that I wouldn't even necessarily need to go there. What you might consider as a group, and this is one thing I bought the Rode mic for, because it's very straightforward and you can pass it around people, is and it might be possible during Zoom to do during COVID conditions to do this, is to have an anthology where this kit, this very, it's quite a basic kit, which is I love for its simplicity of use, to pass it round and to pass it around the houses and to hand it over and to talk somebody through, setting it up, and then you can get a variety of voices for example, an anthology. I think that would be a nice thing to try for a group. Does that answer your question, Rusty? Because it depends on what your writing is and what your genre is. Another question that comes up actually in that connection is fiction more typically is read by someone else, and more typically nonfiction is read by the author of the nonfiction. So if you've got nonfiction books, it seems to be more normal to read your own nonfiction. Whereas I think I would probably give my fiction to an actor. I know my limits on that kind of thing. So I'd get a far better result giving it to somebody who's an actor. Oh, that's interesting. So you wrote radio ads. And I think one of the, because I didn't really talk about the economy needed for writing for audio, but when you write radio ads, they're absolute crystalline, short, economical, punchy, tight types of writing. And I think it takes people by surprise who've not done that kind of very, that audio friendly kind of writing, that is actually quite different. And what I often find is that I'm writing with audio first in mind now. So I have a writing style which is quite storytelling anyway. It's kind of spoken word because it's quite influenced by maybe Scottish storytelling. So it's got a performance gene built in anyway, but I still find it's overwritten when it comes to reading aloud. And the economy needed for writing for the ear is something that takes people by surprise. So that's what writing for audiobooks is about, actually, the tightness and some of the tricks that people use in radio to help flow and to what you can tighten. You'll also have personal words that you're maybe you find you've got sibilant voice, or you've got some taboo sounds that you just can't, they don't sound so great, and so you'll adapt your writing style over time. Publishers are now starting to commission audio first writing, so fiction that's conceived with audio performance in mind. And so writers are starting to have to engage with that concept that audio writing is different. I imagine you were writing for a time slot as well, Rusty. You're probably given a 30-second type of slot, and when I did radio news, again, it was a kind of, if it's over 45 seconds, it's too long. And you got used to writing in kind of beats and with that economy. So you've got a head start in, in the style of writing. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy economy, isn't it? A 20-second challenge. It's something everyone should try, actually. It's just really interesting how it makes you think differently. Sorry, Anita.
That's beyond flash fiction. That's it's more haiku length. Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes, it reminds me of what's that short story, For Sale? Who's it by? Is it Hemingway? Is it For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn? That famous example of a super short fiction which has such a tight story and so packed with emotion and subtext, everything into that one story. So it's possible to make a super succinct form. Yeah, and it helps with elevator pitch. And I think also like practice. And I think what I found, and you probably found this as well, Rusty, doing radio, you have to test it. You have to test it in the room. So people might practice just by reading it to themselves like this. It's not the same as actually reading it out into the room to your cat or anyone else, because the fact of that slight audience awareness, even if it is the cat, makes you hear it with external ears, just a touch, and it makes you go, that's not working, or that could be tighter. You just hear it differently when you hear it out into the room. So the radio newsroom was full of people kind of reading aloud and going, blah, 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 marking things, and blah, blah, blah. They would mark what was the rise and fall of the sentence. If there was a word to land on, they would prep their script with, that's the salient word of that sentence that's got to come out. So they would definitely practice the script and not just imagine that they would come in and be able to interpret on the go. I'm sure that there are amazing audio narrators who can do that, but I think a lot of them, I'm sure they will prep and they'll mark up and highlight words to land on, emphases and that kind of thing. Oh, a piece of kit as well, which is really useful. When you go into your cave to do your audiobook, when you do your 50K or 100K novel, because you're going to be in there a week, okay, just to warn you, it's a long time. What I found really useful in that cave with all the muffled things around was a walkie-talkie. So I've got with my partner, we had walkie-talkies, and it meant that if I was kind of gasping like a fish in the corner, I could say, "Can you bring me some water?" Or "Let me out." So just to be aware, it is quite a long haul, and I mean, massive fun. It's like a sort of home version of showbiz, I think. So quite enjoyable from that point of view, and a level playing field, which is just amazing. That we at home with home studios can put work up and get it sold via Audible. How do people feel about this? Is it something you think you can take forward with your group, or has anyone? I know Bob said you'd looked at audio in the past and you were considering.
I know this is quite amazing, and you going to be providing us with the links to more resources. Makes all the difference in the world. Oh gosh, almost 10 years ago, I was trying to break into voice acting, and it was sort of overwhelming at the time, but now it seems much more doable, and especially coming together and pooling resources and sharing resources and kit and equipment.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of voice actors working from home as providers on ACX. So if voice acting is something you wanted to get into, there is that platform, and people are setting up their home kits, their home setups to be able to do just that. I know an actor sort of next town who does what's the name of that? There's software called Clean Feed. It's a site called Clean Feed, and it's a bit like Zoom, but it lets you get uncompressed audio quality. So it's what the BBC producers are using, and I think there's a free version or a trial version or something. But it means that if you've got your good microphone at home and that actress has got her good microphone at home, you can get comparable audio quality and download their WAV file. And it's just how audio productions are being done, how dialogue productions, dramas, and that kind of thing. So Clean Feed's well worth knowing about. So,
do you see the question from Freddie Gold in the comments about choosing a microphone?
Mic, hanging mics versus mic on your desk. What I find is what I've got is it wasn't an expensive thing here, but it's a kind of cantilever bendy thing. These things you sometimes see, and it was about £15 or something, and I can sort of maneuver it around. And why I have that is I find you get noise from microphones on the desk. So I had one stand which was really solid. It was a piece of brass. You couldn't budge it. It was really strong. And I thought that'll work really well being on the desk. But it picked up reverberations. So I had a kind of metally twang going around in the room, and I couldn't work out what it was, and it came from that mic stand. So I think I would go for overhead. Overhead mic. just because of that noise interference. You've got more control over where you leverage it to as well. I think those things are quite good. Rusty's got a question: how can an amateur voice test for quality? Do you know, I think you can overthink that, because I think people's voices it's about the spirit of your character that comes through your voice. So I think amateur and pro voice is kind of a different. I don't think I'm much more interested in an untrained voice that's got loads of character and spirit and you know, something interesting to say, than I am in a very polished and overproduced voice. That one of the things I earlier talked about, the very fruity radio announcer type of voice. You know, there's some people who have like voices in their boots which are just gorgeous. You know, they could say anything and you just love it. But I think I would rather, if it doesn't fit the material, it doesn't sound characterful. It just sounds like something over polished. And so I think, so I wouldn't make that distinction. I would say, what are they talking about, and what is it? Is it coming across clearly? You can test for quality technically using that audio lab thing, and I would just then ask your friends, is it clear? What ticks have I got that where it's not coming across clearly? Does that help? Because I mean, we listen to radio and we love listening to characterful voices on radio, and you know, that's my feature background. It's I love editing and listening to people with different voices. So it's just a slightly more polished step on from that if you're doing it for an audiobook, because of that slightly more unforgiving, proximity and intimacy and so on, and the need for clarity. Thanks, Linda. I'd be interested in knowing that, actually, yes, if anybody's been working on audio recently. Has anyone tried it?
If you would like to raise your hands, I know we're right at the end here, but if you want to use the little smiley face reactions at the bottom and raise your hands if you have been working on audio, we could get a look that way. So far, I am not seeing anyone who is raising their hand, though. Well, I guess that's the answer to Linda's question. We have our work cut out for us. And Jules, thank you very much. I'm going to turn our meeting over to Dwight now. And oh gosh, just really looking forward to it. And oh, one thing to ask, do we contact you to get all these extra resources, or how will you be handling that?
I'm just going to try and find BookFunnel. Let me go into my PowerPoint and take out that link, and then I'll put it in the chat, and then everyone can take it from there. But you'll also find it in the thing I'll send you. Just one sec here.
Okay.
No, how do I get this? Yeah, I'm just about to get that link. So if you go here, you should be able to find the slides, and there's a couple of tip sheets. I think some of them have an opt-in for my mailing list if you want to join that. But also, I'll give you my there's my email for method writing. And if anybody wants to get in touch, I've got free review copies. I've also got promo codes for audiobooks. So if anyone wants to listen to an audiobook and ideally review it, which would be massive help for me, I do have those promo codes, so you can get hold of those. But I'm always happy for anyone who wants to get in touch. If you have anything to ask about, just use my email address. So yeah.
All right, thank you. And we will have those bits of contact information available to club members as well. And Jules, if you hang on towards the end here, I'll make sure that you have a copy of the comments in the chat.
Oh yeah, great. Thank